What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. On our power rankings list, and remember, all of our odds are provided by our partner, DraftKings. Number 10, the Los Angeles Clippers. Another game from that jam-packed Rivals Week slate on Saturday night was a showdown between the Clippers and the Bucks. The run and dunk man versus the bag man. And the bag man wins this round. He did unspeakable things to Gary Trent Jr. and many other Bucks defenders in this game. He went for 40 points and 9 assists with just 1 turnover. Had everything going. The step back three was going. The drives were going. He was getting to the foul line a ton. Just absolutely torched them. But they very much won the game with the usual Clippers identity of just being an insanely athletic perimeter team that swarms on defense, that forces you to rush things and make mistakes, and that will torch you on the other end by beating you to offensive rebounds. The Clippers ran away with this one in the fourth quarter. It was a close game. Milwaukee actually had a lead in the early fourth, but they forced 5 turnovers, all swarming. Like, Dame tries a behind-the-back dribble, but right when he goes to the behind-the-back dribble, Amir Coffey jumps him and forces a turnover. Gary Trent Jr. in transition has like an easy layup and goes with a behind-the-back dribble that could have shed off Kevin Porter Jr. for a layup, but he just rushes it and fumbles the ball away and turns it over. Giannis slips out of a screen, has an over-the-top passing angle. Pass comes over the top, but they're swarming from the weak side, and he just fumbles the ball away, and it leads to a turnover. Like, that's all bred by that activity. We talked about this with Minnesota and Denver. When you have that type of athleticism on the perimeter, it just forces teams to rush. And when they rush, they make mistakes. The Clippers scored 7 points on runouts from those turnovers as well. They had 3 offensive rebounds in the fourth quarter as well, which all ended in buckets. Terrence Mann Amir Coffey got an easy putback over Chris Middleton where he just bodied him and grabbed the ball. Derrick Jones Jr. kind of slipped out of his screen. And remember that when you slip, the guard needs to get inside position to box out. Dame didn't even bother, so Derrick Jones got inside position on Dame, just got an easy rebound for a putback. It's just a physical mismatch on the perimeter between these two teams. And then Kawhi had his best game since coming back. 18 points. He had these 3 contact finishes through Brook Lopez that I thought were all good signs of his growing confidence in his body. A spin move where he spun into his body and got a layup. Another one where he dropped that shoulder and dislodged him and made like a little short post move. That's a big sign of him getting his strength back. Then a crazy play where he did like this behind the back dribble into a baseline drive and then went up and under and finished with his left hand, also in contact with Brook Lopez. I thought those were all kind of like exciting demonstrations that Kawhi's starting to get his legs back underneath him. The Clippers have won 6 out of 8. They have the best defense in the league in that span and the only defense in the league to hold opponents to under 100 points per 100 possessions in that 8-game span. Hard not to get at least a little excited about the Clippers with how well they're playing on defense and the potential of this offense anchored by Kawhi, James Harden, and Norman Powell. However, as it always is with the Clippers, it's just about whether or not they can stay healthy, and you would be insane to not be a little skeptical about that. Clippers right now are plus 2,500 to win the NBA title on DraftKings, plus 1,300 to win the Western Conference. Number 9, the Milwaukee Bucks. Yes, I know the Clippers just beat them head-to-head, but the Bucks had won 5 straight before that in 8 of 9, and I think they're just a little bit better right now, so I gave them the nod for this week. Just a lot of good and bad in that Clippers loss. Like, Giannis looked great. Again, I think he had like 36 and 13, continues to play like an MVP. Gary Trent Jr. is really starting to get going, specifically with his three-point shot. In his last 13 games, Gary Trent Jr. is shooting 57% from 3 on 5.2 attempts per game. So really exciting stuff there, but the same issues that have consistently plagued this team rose to the surface in that fourth quarter when they lost control against the Clippers. Mainly just their perimeter guys not competing. Like, specifically guys like Gary Trent, Chris Middleton, Damian Lillard, just getting badly torched at the point of attack, badly beat on the glass, just time and time again. But overall, the Bucks have been playing really well. As we said, they had won 8 of 9 before that. Giannis, in that 9-game span, has averaged 29 points, 13 rebounds, and 6 assists as he tries to stay attached to Shea and Nikola Jokic in the MVP race. The Bucks right now, plus 2,500 to win the title, plus 1,000 to win the Eastern Conference. Number 8, the Los Angeles Lakers. They've won 5 out of 6 in what has probably been their most impressive stretch of the season, peaking with that wire-to-wire dominating performance against the Boston Celtics last week that really demonstrated the upside of this team on both ends of the floor. In this 6-game span, the Lakers are 6th in defensive rating. I talked a little bit in the Saturday night show about the influx of defensive talent. When you trade out a guy like D'Angelo Russell, you bring in a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith, and you get a guy like Jared Vanderbilt back from injury, you just bring in two really good defensive players. And it slots everybody else in more achievable defensive roles. And all of a sudden, you just have more lineups with more good defensive players that are in more achievable roles, which is just going to lead to better defense. Well, guess what? In the last 6 games, the Lakers are 6th in defensive rating. Some really impressive defensive stretches during that time, including that win against the Celtics. That's a benefit of bringing in defensive talent the way that they have through just getting healthy in that trade for Dorian Finney-Smith. And then in this stretch, LeBron James and Austin Reeves have really been stepping up their rim pressure. LeBron specifically in that Boston and Golden State game. Austin has been doing this for a while, but like you got to have downhill rim pressure to create easier opportunities for some of these flawed offensive players that they have. And those guys have just done that work. And then Anthony Davis, who had been in a bit of a funk in the previous month or two, it just was absolutely amazing against Boston and Golden State, and looking better physically than he has since the beginning of the season. So really encouraging stuff on that front. The Lakers are in a really good spot to make an all-in type of trade. LeBron and AD are both engaged and playing really well. The roster is mostly healthy at this point, and they have the assets to get some legitimate talent upgrades. I think of them as again, I think that Dallas roster is better. But you need to think like Dallas did last year. This is a team that's in the middle of the West, but if they bring in a couple of high-level role players, just like Dallas did last year with PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, that could be the thing that gets them in position to go on a run. That is the path. The Los Angeles Lakers right now, plus 3,500 to win the title. Big long shot there. Plus 1,600 to win the Western Conference. Number 7, the New York Knicks. They've been very Jekyll and Hyde of late. They're 6-6 in their last 12 games. And in their wins, they score the shit out of the basketball and they defend pretty well. In their 6 losses, they can't make threes to save their life, and they post a 123 defensive rating. On the defensive end, it's been consistent all season every time I watch the Knicks. Teams relentlessly go at Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. And again, there are coverages that Thibodeau has for them to protect those guys, and they just don't execute it very well sometimes. You'll see Jalen Brunson go to throw a hedge and just not contain the ball or not sprint back in rotation. Same sort of thing with Karl Anthony Towns. There's a level of commitment with those guys that's inconsistent on the defensive end. And when they mail it in, it just gets really, really hard for them. They end up in rotation and teams spray it around on them and pick them apart. And then on offense, it literally comes down to 3-point shooting. This is a crazy stat for you guys. In wins for the Knicks this year, Jalen Brunson, 45% from 3. Karl Towns, 44% from 3. Mikal Bridges, 40% from 3. OG Anunoby, 37% from 3. Josh Hart, 39% from 3. In losses, Jalen Brunson, 29% from 3. Karl Anthony Towns, 41%, still hot, but still down 3% from the wins. Mikal Bridges, 29%. OG Anunoby, 32%. Josh Hart, 31%. It's literally every time I watch the Knicks, it's just about which team I'm getting. When they guard and they knock down shots, they can beat anybody. But when they don't guard, when they go cold from the perimeter, things seem to fall apart for them. Right now, the Knicks are plus 850 to win the title, plus 400 to win the Eastern Conference. The Denver Nuggets at number 6 got smashed by the Timberwolves on Saturday. The Wolves just have Denver's number. They've now won 4 in a row against Denver, dating back to last year's Western Conference semifinal series. They just have a big issue on both ends of the floor. When Denver has the ball on offense, Minnesota is just so physical that they have several players that seem to struggle in that setting. I've seen Jamal Murray was good in the Saturday game, but he struggled really bad at times in that second round series last year. Michael Porter Jr. seems to really struggle in that setting, and Jokic can get a little sloppy with the basketball. He had 7 turnovers. And then when you go to the other end of the floor, they just can't stop Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle from getting wherever they want. It doesn't matter how much they load up. Ant can just run around their slower guys, especially guys like Nikola Jokic. And they just don't, Denver just doesn't have the rim protection to really cause problems for Minnesota in the half court. So they get lit up on that end as well. It's just a bad matchup. Not really much they can do about it at this point. They just got to hope they avoid them when they get to the postseason. But Denver had won 8 out of 9 before that. The offense was just absolutely crushing everyone. Really nice give and take from their perimeter players. It's kind of like a who's got it tonight kind of attitude between guys like Jamal Murray, Russell Westbrook, and Julian Strawther, and a little bit of Michael Porter Jr. too. And they do a really nice job of just kind of like feeling which guy has it going that night and playing through them more. And then Nikola Jokic is just playing at that GOAT offensive level that makes everything easier. And then up until the Minnesota game, Nikola Jokic had been defending at a really high level, getting a lot more deflections and steals in ball screens than he had been getting earlier in the season. The Nuggets right now, plus 1,400 to win the title, plus 650 to win the Western Conference. Number 5, the Memphis Grizzlies. They're in a very easy part of their schedule right now. They've had 6 straight wins, but 5 of those 6 wins were against teams that are in the bottom 5 of either conference. So just capitalizing on an easy stretch of their schedule, but a really impressive win against Minnesota in there, a game where they came back from behind in the fourth quarter. Jaren Jackson just kicked the shit out of Julius Randle in that fourth quarter. He's playing insanely well as of late. In his last 13 games, he's averaging 26 points per game on 51% from the field and 35% from three. Really, really high-level hoops from Jaren Jackson. Memphis Grizzlies right now plus 2,500 to win the title, plus 1,000 to win the Western Conference. Number 4, the Boston Celtics. They've been in a weird funk for a while. They're just 13-10 in their last 23 games. Really good offensive rating and defensive rating in that stretch because they've just had some incredibly dominant wins in there that kind of mess up the data. Settling has been the main issue for them in the losses, just specifically Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum just attacking mismatches by shooting over the top instead of being physically aggressive downhill to compromise the defense so they can get their kick out, so they can get their driving kick game going, which again is when Boston is at their best, when they're driving and kicking the ball around. But I did think their win against Dallas was one of their most impressive wins as of late. Jaylen Brown demonstrated a ton more physical aggression and was just living in the paint right in front of the rim. Was getting some of those driving kicks to Kristaps Porzingis that we know that he has when he's playing his best basketball. They got back to moving the ball around. Out of their 44 makes, they had 33 assists. That's a strong indicator of the Celtics getting into their driving kick game. Then they just really clamped down on Dallas's offense, like we all know that they're capable of on defense, and they looked like the Celtics again. They have looked a little tired, even in that early stretch against Dallas. They play every other day until the All-Star break, but at that point they do finally get a rest, and I think the All-Star break is going to be really good for the Celtics before they kind of kick it into gear for the home stretch. They are now plus 235 to win the title, plus 105 to win the Eastern Conference. Number 3, the Houston Rockets. We talked a bunch about them at the top of today's show, so I'm not going to get too much deeper, but they just continue to rack up incredibly impressive wins with their latest 2 wins against the Cleveland Cavaliers. I talked about this in the earlier part of the show, but they've been the best team in the league this year against the best teams in the league. Against teams that have top 10 point differentials, Houston's won 14 times, which stands alone as the most in the league. 78% win percentage, which is also the highest percentage in the league. 5th in offensive rating and 3rd in defensive rating against teams in the top 10 in point differential. Again, I have concerns about their offense in the playoffs, but it's hard to deny that they're not having just an incredible regular season. And Amen Thompson is going to be an absolute star. He's still so raw, but he's already just bludgeoning teams on both ends of the floor with his athleticism. It's crazy to think what he could be in the long run. The Rockets right now, plus 5,000 to win the NBA title, plus 1,600 to win the Western Conference. Number 2, the Cleveland Cavaliers. We also hit them at the top of the show, so I'm not going to get too deep into them here. But they've lost 5 out of 8. Lost their identity in a bunch of ways. They've got to get it back. They got to get back to defending as a unit, both on the perimeter and on the interior, so that they can start forcing turnovers again, so that they can start getting back out in transition. And then when they get stuck in the half court, they need to trust the pass. Mainly talking about Donovan Mitchell there has had some of his worst floor game as of late in the last few weeks. Once they get that ball and player movement back, I think they'll get back on track, especially if they get their defense going again. The Cavs right now, plus 950 to win the title, plus 370 to win the Eastern Conference. And number 1, the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's been a really weird stretch of their schedule. Their last 5 games, they've played 3 bad teams that they beat, and then they played the Dallas Mavericks twice, who they lost to. And Dallas is a bad matchup for them in general, but especially when they don't have their bigs, Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren, right? In the latest loss to Dallas, the second one, they really struggled with this like bizarre zone look that Jason Kidd used, where he just took the top 2 guys in the zone and just doubled Shea. Like as soon as he crossed half court, they were going after him to get the ball out of his hands, and it just kind of discombobulated the Thunder and they fell apart. But it feels very matchup related. And this is something that I think we need to keep in mind as we look at Oklahoma City struggling with Dallas, as we look at teams like the Lakers struggling with teams like the Clippers, as we look at teams like the Nuggets struggling with the Timberwolves. Like when you look at that sort of thing, it's just a reminder of what I talked about last year going into the postseason. A lot of this Western Conference is going to come down to matchups. catching teams that you match up well against versus and avoiding teams that you match up poorly against could literally be the difference between losing in the first round and going to the NBA Finals. So let's keep that in mind as we are looking at our playoff field for the West as we get closer. Matchups are going to play a huge role in how this whole thing ends up. The Thunder right now, plus 270 to win the title, plus 125 to win the Western Conference. And as always, our odds, are from our partner DraftKings.